Hare Krishna. Welcome everybody to Saturday Satsang class. Today we'll be discussing from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. We'll just start off offering some prayers. Om Niganatanam Hasyaganangana Shakalya Takshu Inatainam Tashmai Shigare Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Right. Reading from chapter 8, text 8. Abhyasyo uktaya tesaya yenam gatina parama purusham devam yati parama udavinteyam. Translation. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, O Pirtam, is sure to reach me. Purport. In this verse, Lord Krishna stresses the importance of remembering him. One's memory of Krishna is revealed by chanting the mahā-mantra, Hare Krishna. By this practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's tongue and mind are engaged. The mystic meditation is very easy to practice, and it helps one attain the Supreme Lord. Purusham means enjoyer. Although living entities belong to the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord, they are in material contamination. They think themselves enjoyers, but they are not the Supreme Enjoyer. Here is clearly stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the difference of manifestation and planetary expansions in Narayana and Vyasadeva, etc. The devotee constantly thinks himself as the object of worship. The Supreme Lord is and other features Narayana, Krishna, Rama, etc. By chanting Hare Krishna, this practice will purify him. At the end of his life, due to his constant chanting, he will be transferred to the kingdom of God. Yoga practice, meditation is the super soul within. Similarly, by chanting Hare Krishna, one fixes his mind on the Supreme Lord. His mind is fickle, and therefore it is necessary to engage the mind by the force of thinking of Krishna. One explains often given by the caterpillar thinks to become a butterfly, and so is transformed into a butterfly in the same life. Similarly, if we constantly think of Krishna, it is certain that at the end of our lives we shall have the same bodily constitution as Krishna. Okay, thank you guys for coming out tonight. Yeah. So the reason I chose this verse, I thought it was pretty nice because Krishna kind of gives us an impossible task of constantly remembering him in such a way. But he says it's an easy practice if one develops, a taste for chanting in that sense. And by developing a taste of chanting, one's able to meditate on the Supreme. And by doing that, it's an attempt to glorify the Lord. And by glorifying the Lord, it's, even though it could be, performed imperfectly or such a way, it's still yeah. And by practicing yoga, okay, sorry guys, first time. Anyways, by meditating on the Lord constantly, he's able to hit the stage above, in a sense where he's constantly engaged in many ways. And this mahā-mantra is a transformation it's a transformation, meaning that even in this life you could transform from any activity, from state of life, from the lowest of life to you could become a pure devotee, a perfect devotee. But one doesn't see themselves as a devotee because a devotee means that they're absolutely perfect, so therefore they constantly think of themselves as a non-devotee, as a neophyte in that sense. And you could see that in this practice there's no holes, meaning that this was very nice, I heard it today. Holes meaning H, hearing, O, observing, L, lives, E, experiencing, and S, sharing. And by this, it's first you hear, then you observe the teachings of the Lord, and by that you end up living by it. And then by living by it, then you experience, the real taste that the Lord gives you, the real love that you experience, and that naturally you want to share that experience you feel. So this is why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, one who shares this knowledge is very dear to me, in many sense. But the devotee doesn't do it because he wants to be very dear to Krishna, because in that sense he just wants to please Krishna. He doesn't want, for him, it could be that Krishna's not pleased with him 100%, but as long as he is convinced that he's pleasing the Lord by devotional service, he's able to do so. He's able to take on risks and anxieties for the Lord's service, not for himself in many senses. And you see this in all the pastimes of Vrindavan and so on, and all the Lord's associates. They're constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, disregarding all their personal features and their selfish anxieties. Because once somebody's engaged in devotional service, then they're able to attain the Lord in many ways. Because by attaining the Lord, first you develop knowledge, and by developing up knowledge, you're able to see, what's the essence of life, why we're here for. The essence of life is just, to make sacrifices for Vishnu. And by making sacrifices for Vishnu is not for anything material gains. So you disregard all demigod and all their worships, and you just want to glorify the Lord. And by glorifying the Lord, you could chant His holy names, or in a sense, you worship the deity form. It says in the Bhagavatam that if one is not able to give, distribute books or give people the Lord, they should, worship the deity within the temple. And by that, they're able to develop a different type of rasa that one could develop. In a sense, because many people come up with many excuses not to take up spiritual practices. They say, "Oh, I'm too busy," or "I don't have time," or "I don't have the knowledge," or many things could come about. But you can see this within the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna just constantly refutes all of Arjuna's excuses. He tells Arjuna, "Oh, I don't have time." Then he tells him, "Make time." "Oh, I have too much duties." People say, "I have too much duties." Well, who has the most duties more than Arjuna? Arjuna was, he was a husband. He was, so many things, but he was able to perform his duty and his spiritual duty. So therefore, he was balanced. And if you look at Srila Prabhupada's letters, I guess in some of his letters, he constantly tells his disciples to be well balanced. In a sense, he's not to focus too much on one's health, because if therefore they don't have time for spiritual practice. Like I can't go to Bhagavatam class because I'm exercising or something. It doesn't make sense. But if one does neglect his health, then in the beginning if they're focused on their health too much, they're not focusing on spiritual life. Then at the end of their life, if they don't maintain their body in many senses, so the idea is try to maintain the health so you don't have any bodily issues. So therefore you could perform devotional service in full capacity. But we have to remember that nobody dies healthy. So therefore realizing that the body is just a temporary place. And we realize, Krishna says also in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 7, verse 1, he says, by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with the mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Prabhupada says, doubts means a sign of intelligence, but once you come to the absolute truth, you should never doubt again. And realizing that, we're not just here, like you hear quite often, almost, you hear a lot, don't blindly follow, don't do this, inquire, because that's the human nature. We're meant to inquire, so, we're meant to inquire from, spiritual teachers, spiritual masters, and by acquiring them, they could give us, the absolute truth by that. Because the Guru is a manifestation of Krishna, and by that, then the Guru could give you, that pure love that we all search for, in that sense. Yeah. Or does anybody? I'm just kidding. But yeah, when one surrenders unto the Guru, when one surrenders unto the Lord, they perform activities, and like I said earlier, they could take on many risks, and they just to please, Krishna in many ways. Like you see the cowherd boys in Vrindavan. When Krishna came back from the pasturing grounds, they felt so anxious that they just wanted, they just wanted to, feed him, massage his feet, massage his body, and each cowherd boy had, different, duties. The older cowherd boys wanted to protect Krishna, but we know that Krishna doesn't necessarily, I guess, I'm speculating that, but yeah. So this idea of just service all around about is, forget, our bodily features to an extent, because we realize that this body is meant for the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he tells Sanatana Goswami, yeah, why take your own life when that body belongs to me, because Sanatana Goswami, he was, what was it that he had? Yeah. Yeah. So therefore, yeah, so Lord Chaitanya gave Sanatana Goswami an instruction. So we had a discussion earlier. What was the difference between, actual, spiritual instruction or material instruction, and how does that differ? And you could see that, I guess you could say that's a material instruction, but it falls in the world of, spirituality, because that his physical body gave him the capacity to perform devotional service. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, or Prabhupada says in the purport, that this body is capable to elevate to become elevated. Every living entity is capable to become elevated. And when you think about it, the word capable just means, I actually wrote it down because I thought it was kind of interesting. Just capable means to have the ability and fitness quality necessary to do something or to achieve. So we all have the capability. And it says every living entity, not just human beings, because every living entity could perform somewhat devotional service. We should try to engage them in any sense, by chanting some. Yeah, there's 9 processes of devotional service. I don't know the Sanskrit exactly, but one's hearing, chanting, hearing, remembering, and so on. And if you could just give somebody the holy name, it's just so potent in itself that they just hear the sound vibration, and therefore they're already kind of cleansed, they're purified in a sense. And by that you started the process for them, and so therefore the process for them is they already made 1%, and then in their next life they could continue on that. And so therefore you're saving them from a visit from the Yamadutas, in a sense, because they already have started the process of chanting the holy names. And so, because if we think that, no, I don't want to disturb this individual, I don't want to do this. I said it earlier, quite a few weeks ago. But yeah, if we don't disturb them, the Yamadutas will, in many sense. If we don't approach them, they're just going to suffer. We should have, in a sense, we should have passion in this, but passion with intelligence. And then what does that mean? That means I heard it. It means that you have a compass then, because you know where you're going. Yeah. Maybe I said it wrong, but yeah, in that sense, because if you have a compass, then you know where you're going, but then you're determined. Not just you know where you're going, you don't have no drive, and then what's the point? If you know knowledge, but if you're not going to apply it, it's practically a sin, because you're not. We're here to deliver the conditioned souls in that sense, because we're service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You could see this, and you could just introduce them anyways. For some of them, it could be kind of hard to digest that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so maybe they could worship another form of Krishna, like it says here, Narayana, Ram, and etc. But Krishna is, like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, what was it? He's one in indifference, and then he's one in indifference. So therefore, he's all pervading, and so by worshiping, the sense of Narayana, and even in the past times, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they weren't, I guess, completely fixed on the sense of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God. They were worshiping Lord Ramachandra. Is that how you say? Yeah. So they were fixed on that sense, but then again, they were fixed. Fixed just means something that's not, just a screw that's tight enough that just won't, come loose. And so we should be like that. We should be, so fixed and determined in our practice that realizing that, there's many stages of, above. One's the neophyte, somebody who has not that much belief in him, could be easily swayed by an argument in many senses. And then they should be very careful associating with the material energy, because they could just, they could fall away if they're not in the right association. And in the 12th chapter of the Gita, it says, one who doesn't have the chance to come into devotional service, I guess it also says, the impersonal path is probably the most beneficial for them. But if one is able to come to the path of devotional service, there's no need the step-by-step process, because the step-by-step process is gradual. Why take the gradual step when you could just take the elevator up? You save a lot more time and you make a lot more advancement. Somebody once, Parashakti Mataji told me before I had moved in, she said, yeah, living in the material world is very it's very nice coming to the temple. You can make gradual process, but once you move into the temple, you're constantly engaged. You're constantly associated. There's like this gap. There's this gap in the clouds, and you just go through it, and then you just make so much advancement in so many sense. And it's not that we think that we're advanced, or it's not like that we think that, I hit this level, that I hit this prestige. That's our tendency. Once we get to a certain level, we just by nature we're just going to think like, prestige is going to come about. This is one of the defects of being in this body. It's part of our biggest anartha is having a material body, but we just got to work with the best what we got. Meaning that, what's it called? Sorry. Yeah, just gotta work with what we have. Just somebody who could, be blind, or some people say that the Bhagavad Gita is too hard for me to read. In the sense, this isn't a philosophy. Like it's an intellectual philosophy, but you don't have to be like a scholar to understand it. It's through devotional service Krishna reveals himself to you in many senses. And like there's a lot of pastimes in the Chaitamrita. And then there's this one where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was I don't know the exact pastimes, but he was traveling, and then he sees this one devotee. His spiritual master instructed him to read the Bhagavad Gita, and when he goes, he had the Bhagavad Gita upside down, and he was crying. And Lord Chaitanya asked him, why is he crying? He said, well, my spiritual master gave me a task
He was reading it, but he couldn't pronounce Sanskrit.
Yeah.
People were making fun of him.
Yeah.
This guy's illiterate. Because he couldn't read.
Yeah.
And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was crying when he was reading Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "You can't read. Why are you crying?" And he said, "Well, whenever I read Bhagavad Gita, I just imagine Krishna on the chariot with Arjuna, and Krishna looks so beautiful, and so it makes me cry." And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "You understood properly."
Yeah.
The essence of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. So we see this, people try to understand, in colleges, people try to understand the Gita from a, scholarly point and whatnot, but they don't understand the Gita. We had a couple classes, then what are you going to do next? Most people don't even consider what are they going to do next. Most people just consider what are they going to have next, what are they going to put in their body next. How am I going to, satisfy the tongue? How am I going to, fill up my belly in many senses? But they never think about how am I going to satisfy the Lord's tongue? How am I going to fill up the Lord's belly? In many senses. Yeah, because if we realize if we just disregard our senses, because at first our tendency is just to become, selfish, but evidently by the practice of devotional service, we become selfless in a sense. And this path of, devotional service, anybody could perform is, and literally, you see it almost everywhere, every temple you go, and you meet devotees from all around the world. It's not just like, oh, my family's from here, it's this and that. Yeah, that has a role in it, but at the same time, they're just, when somebody's engaged in devotional service together, they don't see, the material platform. Everybody's one who understands knowledge, one who's given the knowledge by devotional service and by the spiritual master. They see everybody as a spiritual being, and everybody who can see as everybody who has spiritual eyes, they, if you have material eyes, you see the material nature as, enjoyment, exploitative. Everybody tries to come up with a lot of solutions for, material problems in a sense, what's going to happen economically or, sustainably. But ones who get spiritualized, they realize like, okay, I just take, enough to satisfy the senses, and then the rest of it goes on. Like a grihastha in a sense, they feed everybody else before they feed themselves and their family in that sense. They feed all the brahmanas first. So this is culture, Culture just means, like everybody's following, dharma in many senses, material dharma, but I guess the best culture is Sanatana Dharma. And then you can see this in Sanatana Dharma, all these ashrams and whatnot, they're meant to become self-elevated in many senses, realizing that, by engaging in one's ashram, I'm able to maintain the mind, I'm able to subdue the mind, I'm able to become detached from the mind. And from becoming detached from the mind, you realize that, I'm not the body. I realize I'm just a servant of the Lord. And then by realizing that you're the servant of the Lord, you just want to fulfill, whatever ashram you're into is full capacity. You're not half in, half out. You're not, half in, like, oh, I'm just full renunciate, but, sometimes I have lunch with, whomever, Monday or something. But, yeah, it's just once performing, the life of Vanaprastha, Grihastha, Sannyasi. These are the four orders meant to cultivate knowledge in many ways, perform service. Because we're here because we wanted to satisfy our desires, but then eventually we become agitated, and then just we become stressed, and so therefore we jump to the other aspect of serving the Lord, and then by that we are able to become very pleased and very satisfied. It's because spiritual life is not easy, obviously. Not everybody's constantly, it's not just like, oh, I'm spiritual, so therefore I'm constantly happy, I'm constantly like, giggity and I'm always like have this happy face, No, sometimes it could be very austere. But Krishna puts his faith in those who perform austerities, because he knows that the individual who shows that they could perform austerities, he knows that he's very fixed in his faith. So therefore, he could perform any services for me. So therefore, I give him the capacity. When somebody surrenders unto the Lord, Krishna takes away everything from him. But then when he fully surrenders, he gives him probably more than what he would ever thought him. Krishna gives you what you can actually handle. So therefore, somebody may have a lot of Lakshmi, but it's because it's their nature and they could handle it well in that sense, and because he knows they'll be able to perform it in that sense in his service. Not everybody's capable to do every particular service, but we all have a service that we'll perform, and eventually we'll be able to perform such services in the spiritual world. But it's not that one should try to meditate on one's Sarup or one's spiritual form, because it's not like Prabhupada. He it's not that he preach about the spiritual world. He preached about how to get to the spiritual world, in the sense he said, go back home, back to Godhead. Then he by chanting a number of fixed rounds, you follow the 4 regular principles, and then this is by one performing these activities, one becomes purified, and when one becomes purified, and then by one's purification, at the end of his life, he is able to, it says in the purport, he's able to attain the kingdom of God. And that just means he doesn't try to rule over the kingdom of God, because that's what he did in the first place. He means attain it means he becomes a resident in the kingdom of God. In the sense, he could become in the form of a rock or a tree, or even a cowherd boy, and many things. But they're completely satisfied. I remember one time a devotee told me, he's very new, and I thought it was really far out, because I was like, wow, we all know him very well. I won't say his name. But he said, I told him, so what's on your mind lately? And he told me, well, one day, I prayed to be in the rock of Vrindavan so Krishna could step on me and I melt like butter. And I thought that was really sweet, actually. I don't know why, but yeah. I was like, wow, that's pretty advanced. So we see everybody as advanced in a sense, We're supposed to treat everybody, one as superior, equal, or lower self, but it's hard to do that when you see everybody as more advanced than you. So you cultivate, this humble kind of service attitude, so therefore you want to serve every living entity. But not just materially, not just giving them their basic necessities. You give them what they actually need. And one doesn't become very prideful. That's not just because, oh yeah, this person came to the Christian launch because I gave him a book, or this and that. One realizes oh, it's through the Lord's mercy that he was, the spark of life was imbibed in him, and just by seeing the holy name of the Lord, just like that, he just because you see them when you're out or you're distributing, or just even they come around, you look into their eyes and you're able to see Moga said, just the cry for help. You see this cry for help, and you want to help them. But it's not just I want to feed them. I just wanted. You give them what they actually need, in the spiritual knowledge. Because through this spiritual knowledge, one starts this process, and by one starting this process, it's a never-ending process. Life is at the never. One doesn't come to the point where they absolutely know everything. Sometimes you'll meet people like that. You're I already know this and I already know that, and then so you could tell them many things. You could agitate their mind, or this and that, or you could just say all right, life is a never-ending process of cultivating knowledge, and by not even this life, in the next life, and the next life, by cultivating knowledge, knowledge of Krishna and what he likes, what knowledge that actually matters, not just this and that, material gains and whatnot. But yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Oh well. Well, if anybody has any questions / comments / big old chastise. I'm saying, all right, Bhakta Meal. Hare Krishna.
For your class. My question is, but first I really like your realization. It's really deep, really resonate within my heart.
Thank you.
Praise you because of Krishna. No, it's really nice, deep realization. But my question is, why do we want to go to the elevator? Why we don't want to go to the Brahman realization, Paramatma realization, and then Bhagavan realization?
That's a really good question. Because yeah, you're right. Why wouldn't we go by the step-by-step process? Because the step-by-step process is a more austere process, and Krishna values those who perform austerities. If you just kind of cut corners in many sense, you could say, then how does how am I very dear to Krishna? And yeah, going the step-by-step process is very nice. But when one completely surrenders to the Lord, it comes all in one, in a sense. It's just once you start chanting Krishna's names, then you start realizing, the soul within. In a sense, it is a step-by-step process, but it's a faster step-by-step process. You still go through the same processes, but it's, in the sense, somebody who goes just to the impersonal aspect of Brahman realization, it's not like they have love for Krishna yet. Somebody who starts chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, or just starts cultivating, affection for the Lord, they realize that impersonal aspect, but then they have affection for Krishna. So that in the sense, they're still going by the step-by-step process. Because Prabhupada said, he says in one, I think, lecture, he says, this impersonal aspect is just the sense of somebody who goes through like a personal experience that may be tough for them, and so therefore they resent God, and so they believe that God is an impersonal thing, so therefore it's easy for them to kind of relate to Him. I'm not quoting 100% right, but it was around that lines. But yeah, so the best of an explanation I could give is you still go through the same process, but in a sense, it's still, you have an attachment towards Krishna. And so therefore you develop a more of attachment. Then you value more this aspect of impersonalism and Bhavagan and whatnot, and so many on. Because if not, then you just start with the impersonal aspect. You just, somebody could just be stuck there on the personal aspect, in a sense. So when somebody just introduced to chanting the mahā-mantra, later on they realize, what is the impersonal aspect. It's like a Westerner. Some of them, we never know, like for me, I never knew what, I never heard about Krishna, I never, experienced. So therefore, you're exposed, in New Age kind of spirituality, this idea of, oneness and many terms like that. And it's very common, and it's easy to digest though. It's a lot harder to digest that, Krishna is, a young blue boy who likes to cause havoc, who likes butter in many senses. And you could say, how is this the God that I'm supposed to worship? How is this somebody that's supposed to give me knowledge, Because in many senses, like there's a lot of pastimes in where they underestimated Krishna, as Kamsa did in the arena, and in many senses. But yeah, I hope that's a satisfying answer. Govardhan Prabhu.
I think thank you for that. I think many of us are curious, how did you come to Krishna consciousness?
Well, it's probably through the mercy of devotees or one's past activities. I'm just kidding. Yeah, well, I guess I was already meditating. I didn't have an idea that I was meditating on the super soul within, that I wanted to know the absolute truth in that sense. It was like double-bladed sword, because I wanted to change, activities in my life. I wanted to do this and that. I wanted to. Actually, matter of fact, I was starting to I don't want to like use like these like, you know, words like manifest and whatnot, but I was already kind of like praying, like I just like, and I really want to, I would like to wake up early, you know, I would like to stop doing certain activities. And then when I came into the philosophy, I was like, wait a minute, how is this all in one, you know? I was like, how is this everything that somebody is looking for actually, you know, for a complete change, for a complete roundabout. And so when it came, it was just like a real like, for me, it was like second nature at first, or not really, but it was like really like, it felt real natural to be, I guess, in the association of devotees. And I hope I didn't make any feel uncomfortable at first when it came, or in front of the deities, you know. But the thing is, like, when you first come around, you create so many offenses that you don't even know, and then you just like, for me, like, you know, I won't say like, you know, passing like, you know, some like gas in front of deities or something like that, or not like, you know, like, or not just like walking in and bowing down, you know, realizing that these are very like, you know, sacred things. And so later on, you realize like, oh wow, these are actually very valuable things, you know, because when somebody comes into contact with devotional service, their knowledge is bestowed on them. So for me, it was this idea that I wanted to change, you know, habits and lifestyle, and then and I was at a crossroads in my life at the time, you know, but I'm past the crossroads, you know, I'm a block away. Okay. Anybody else have any comments / questions or reflections or feedback? Ish.
Yeah, I guess just to say out loud, I guess it stuck with me when you mentioned the 7th chapter and the first verse. I don't know if you said it was in the purport, or Prabhupada had just mentioned at some point that having doubts is actually an intelligent feature of a person.
Yeah.
But once they have come in contact in one way or another with the absolute truth, you shouldn't be acting with doubts.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a part of your nature anymore, at least in relation to Krishna and the absolute truth.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's just a really important thing.
Yeah, because it's.
I haven't really heard that said in that way before.
Yeah, I heard it a long time ago, and that stuck with me too, actually. And so that was just. It was really nice because, you know, when you do first come about, you of course you're gonna have doubts. You know, it's like, what do you mean? Like somebody who's very, especially somebody from the Western point of view. You know, you're just like, how am I gonna bow down? You know, or something like that. Or this idea of like, you know, taking remnants from, you know, a saintly person. You think that this is bizarre. You know, like how does this make sense? You know, so you start doubting the process, or you hear experiences that don't really strengthen your faith in any sense, especially if you first come around, if you start like kind of exposing yourself to many things like that. And so doubt comes about, and doubt's actually very powerful. But doubt's just like, you know, that's just Maya doing her job in a sense. That's just because, again, you know, Maya just wants to, she's a devotee as well, and so she's trying to do her service as the best of her ability, the best of her capacity. So therefore, she's gonna bestow doubt on you in many senses. So, you know, one who actually surrenders, they could overcome this, you know, this sense of doubt very easily. As Krishna says, one who surrenders unto me, they overcome this material nature, or in that sense. But yeah, they overcome this, you know, the material world very easily. And then, you know, you realize that devotees are transcendental from the modes of material nature. They become like, you know, detached from, you know, the modes and whatnot. Although, even performing devotional service, we still kind of go in these modes in a sense. But it's kind of purified in a sense because we're performing the service. Like, I guess in my experience, I could, you know, be moded out or something. I could be in the mode of ignorance, you know, I could be in the bodily concept of life. But you know, I'm still, in a sense, it's still purifying because you're performing devotional service in that sense. So it's not like, you know, Prabhupada says, you know, 2 people are wiping down the table, you know, but one's constantly thinking of Krishna and the other one's just doing it for material gain. But they look like they're doing the same, you know, but they're completely different. You know? And you could say it's vice versa. Somebody who's in the complete bodily concept of life but serving Krishna, you know, they're still getting some benefit, yeah, in that sense. So yeah, so this idea of doubt is just, just it comes and goes. Just the mind is very flickering. Arjuna says the mind is hard to control, just like the wind. In that sense. But yeah, one should be very tolerant. In that sense, Vijay Prabhu said, one who's tolerant has nothing to tolerate, and one who's intolerant has everything to tolerate. And people actually really like that one in books. It really gets them. They like that line. It's just, it's a common line. But yeah. So I hope that elaborated on your comment. Okay. Thank you for tolerating me, and I hope I'm not kicked out next time. I'm just kidding. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Vijay, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay.